So the concrete test you can apply is, like pick a problem where your user can verify the output in less time than it would take them to do the task itself. If they can do that, you're shipping productivity. If not, you're just, like shipping a new chore disguised as productivity.
Welcome to Dev AI, where we talk with the builders and thinkers shaping the future of software and AI. I'm Balaji Subramanian. Today we are talking about what happens after developers get their AI. For the last couple of years, developers had the clearest AI productivity story. We got copilots, coding assistants, IDE agents, and now coding agents that can look across a code base, use tools, make changes, run checks, and help move work forward. But in some ways, developers were the easier case. The user is technical, the task is usually bounded, the output can be inspected, and the workflow already has guardrails around it like testing, coding, review, CI, and version control. Now, the rest of the enterprise wants the same leverage: sales, finance, IT, legal, support operations, HR, all of them dealing with the same problem: too much context spread across too many tools. So the question is, can everyone else just buy their AI the way developers bought theirs? Probably not. For business users, the problem is messier. The work cuts across teams, systems, permissions, approvals, and compliance boundaries. And once AI can do more than answer questions, once it can take action, trust becomes a whole ballgame. That's where this stops being a use case conversation and becomes a platform conversation. What do enterprise actually buy? And what do they still have to build themselves? And what has to be true before companies trust agents with real work? Today, I'm joined by Vipin Mohan, Head of Product for Agentic AI at AWS, where he leads the third-party agent platform for Amazon Quick. This is a market conversation more than a product one. We're using Amazon Quick as one lens into something bigger. What enterprise is really trying to buy and build, govern, and trust in this next wave of AI. Vipin, welcome to Dev AI. Thank you for taking time to join us.
Thank you, Balaji, for having me on the Dev AI podcast. It's great to be on. My main focus is to make agentic AI useful for business user personas, exactly what you're talking about: sales reps, finance reps, ops, IT, and legal. The product that I work on is Amazon Quick at AWS, and I own the agent interoperability within Amazon Quick. I'm also starting to own some of the developer use cases through Kiro, which is another product focused on developer use cases, but looking to go deeper onto the business user personas today.
Awesome. I mean, developers is where I spend all my time. So it's great. It's great. We'll talk about it offline. I know when I met you 8 years ago or something, but you spent about 6 years at AWS on sort of Kubernetes product, EKS Anywhere. Then you moved to Quick and, of course, Agentic AI. What did the container wave teach you about how a new platform lands in enterprises? How will the agent wave play differently?
Yeah, it's been close to a decade, Balaji, since you and I have been known each other. 6 years on containers and EKS taught me a few things, and one of them I've had to unlearn for the agent wave. The lessons that transfer are open standards, beat proprietary every time. For containers, it was Docker, OCI, Kubernetes. Now for the agent wave, it's around MCP, A2A. So bet on the open layer. Second thing is operations are key. Nobody buys a platform because of a beautiful keynote demo. They buy it because they believe the platform delivers reliability for their production workloads. At EKS, we cut version upgrade issues by over 90%, and that was critical work for the business. It was boring and glamorous, but it was very decisive. And enterprise adoption is typically gated by security and governance. It's not more around the feature side. And what doesn't transfer is that containers had a clean unit boundary. There was a container image, and you could ship it, deploy it, and roll back. Agents don't have that. The unit is more fluid, it's stateful, and it crosses multiple systems. You just can't deploy an agent. You have to deploy it at its identity, the context, rate limits, and even have an audit trail for enterprise adoption. And honestly, like, this wave is going to play out faster and messier than containers, I feel. Containers had a lot of bake time, many years to consolidate before mainstream enterprise adoption. But I honestly feel the boring stuff is going to win again: identity, audit, version control, costs, the same playbook. Whoever takes the boring stuff seriously is going to win.
I agree. The whole thing is compressed with this AI. Everything is not like multi-year playbook. Everything is changes rapidly. So in coding assistance, the cleanest enterprise AI story we've had individual buyers, bounded tasks, inspectable output, where in the broader employee experience, are you seeing similar clear gains today? And where is it still mostly like a demo theater?
Great question. So where AI is delivering, real productivity gains for non-developer personas like business users, is where the work looks structurally like coding. Things which have like narrow scope, bounded tasks, and ground truth that the user can verify within seconds. Everywhere that pattern holds, I've seen this agent way working. And places where it doesn't work, you're looking at a demo theater like you called out. Concrete examples, think of triage and routing, support tickets, IT alerts, security alerts. Those are all more structured. That's where I'm seeing a lot of adoption and excitement. But the demo theater scenario is more around anything autonomous with consequences and slow verification. Think of like supply chain decisions or financial close at the end of a month or end of a quarter. Those are critical workloads and critical use cases wherein production maybe has like 200 edge cases that the demo never showed people. So I think the unifying principle is whether the user is a sales rep or a compliance analyst, if they can verify the output in less time than it would take to complete the task itself, then it lands well. But if the verification takes longer than to actually do the task, then all you've done is you're shipping a new chore disguised as productivity for these users.
Yeah,
Coding
that
assistants have got this right because the developer reads the code, runs the test, and they can get it done in 30 seconds. But the ones use cases for business personas are a little more different than coding assistants.
No, that's a great one. I think you view it as a spectrum. Not all can be automated. Certain things that you know for sure is more automatable than things that require human judgment. And particularly financial close for the end of the quarter. You do not want to make a mistake. Your stock will drop 50%. You can't blame the AI for it. Now, the first way of enterprise AI was like discovery, search, and synthesize data, like clean. Clean was probably a good example. The next wave is like actions. What changes about the product from discovery, search, and synthesis product versus action product, where in the enterprise already crossed it today?
The line gets crossed when the blast radius is low and the observability is high. And the line does not get crossed, when actions are irreversible or expensive. And when it crosses, the deal cycle typically doubles, maybe even triples in some cases. To give you an example of when it's crossed today, think of ticket triage, calendar and email actions, lightweight ops, password resets, opening tickets, status updates. Those are like low stakes, high frequency, and easy to reverse. Where it is not crossed is anything that's customer facing. And we talked about the financial close, anything that is regulated, anything that's irreversible. So the blast radius of one bad agent action on a wire transfer is going to be extremely large. And nobody's going to ship that in production right now without a human in the loop. And what changes when you cross the line? I think it's three things. One, the product changes. So you ship rollback, audit, and approval flows, not just generation. The trust model changes. That's the second thing. You move from review every output to approve in policy. So the human approves the rules, not each individual action. And the customer conversation also changes. It's the security, legal, and compliance. They have to show up at every meeting. And 8-week sales cycle sometimes become a 6-month enterprise procurement cycle. And that's the last one is a surprise for many product teams that I've seen in my experience as well. So going from discovery to action is not a product feature. It's a different go-to-market motion entirely.
Let's talk about a little bit more on the protocol side. We understand the business side of the problem and how enterprise struggle with it. But on the protocol side, obviously MCP is as a tool layer. I think it's fairly winning in the market. And then obviously A2A is evolving for inter-agent coordination. There's a lot of support for A2A. Everybody in the world is supporting A2A. I think, AWS, Microsoft, Google, IBM, etc. But shared protocols and cross-vendor coordinations are different problems. Are you seeing agents from different vendors meaningfully delegate work to each other in production today? Or is cross-vendor coordination still working its way from spec to into real deployment?
Honestly, I don't think so. The protocols are settled enough. MCP and A2A are both open source. They're under the Linux Foundation. The trust model is not yet standardized. What I see in production today is mostly MCP. So agents are calling systems as tools, and that integration works. But real agent to agent, like agent A handing off to agent B's reasoning loop, and agent B runs on a different vendor's infrastructure with a different identity and different audit, that is demo material. I have not seen it in production at scale. And if you
Yeah, I
ask me
think
why, like there's the gap, when agent A delivers something to a different agent, right, and the work goes on, how do you determine who's accountable, who owns the audit log? whose identity propagates across the chain. Those are still up in the air to some extent, and it doesn't really describe the liability model very clearly. And enterprises will not deploy things that they cannot audit. So my honest read is, MCP works in production today. The A2A protocol works in demos, but I think the main gap overarching is governance and auditability. It's not about the speculation of the protocol.
Yeah, speaking of that, MCP has OAuth 2.1 spec, but the rest of the enterprise auth surface like SSO into Okta or Antra, standardized audit trail, fine-grained tool-level permissions on behalf of identity, like non-human identity propagation, is being solved outside the protocol. MCP doesn't solve that. Identity vendor is being solved by Auth0 or WorkOS, or you would solve it on a host platform like Quick. Is that the right architecture where the spec is lean and then with the ecosystem filling in, or the gap is going to slow down the enterprise rollout? I think that seems to be what you alluded to. Is it sustainable? I mean, the problem, as you described it, is sort of real. When do you get to a point where it's stable? What's the right architecture?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's the right architecture, and it's going to slow enterprise rollout over the next few months while the rest of the stack catches up. The right call is that the specs are lean and they rely on existing standards. And those kind of specs typically age better than fat specs that try to solve everything. Nice thing is we didn't reinvent identity. They picked the OAuth 2.1 standard, which already had a decade of enterprise adoption. And I think that is the right architectural decision. But the cost of that decision is that enterprises get one throat to choke, so to speak. If the SSO that they're using is Okta, the audit is Splunk, and the fine-grained permissions are on the host platform, it becomes unclear, and the CIO has no clear story for the board. And that ambiguity typically stalls organization-wide deployments. I think how it resolves is host platforms like Quick, they become the trust boundary. The protocol stays lean, but the host takes on the responsibility of governance that enterprises actually need. And identity vendors like Auth0 and WorkOS, they fill in the rest.
Yeah, every SaaS vendor is building their own agents on Box and Canva, PagerDuty. The list is obviously growing every day, and I'm also working on some things. And every horizontal platform that like yourself wants to host them. Who captures the value in that relationship over time? Is a clear economic model emerging, or is everyone still figuring it out in real time?
Yeah. You're asking me the million, maybe even $1 billion question in the market right now. The honest answer is I think nobody knows yet, but I'll give you my structural bet on this. I think there's two layers competing for the same revenue. There's the SaaS vendors that own the data and the workflow, and then there's the horizontal platforms that own the user attention and the orchestration. So the value is going to accrue at whichever layer has the deeper moat for any given use case, which means that the answer could vary depending on what domain you're in. I think where SaaS wins is on like deep workflow specific verticals. You talked about Snowflake, they're big on data. Salesforce has the customer record. Workday has everything data about HR. And their agent is closer to that truth. The data gravity there is real. But I think cases where the horizontal layer could win, as you know, is the cross-functional surface. Think of like email, chat, calendar. That's where users typically spend their day in, and the attention is stickier than SaaS vendors typically expect. So the horizontal layer doesn't have to be smarter than the SaaS agent. It just has to own the surface where work happens. And how do you know who's capturing value? We should wait and watch when the renewal conversations happen. And by the way, I'm curious to know what you're working on. Like we should maybe talk about that offline.
Yeah, absolutely, we'll do. And I think to your point, every major enterprise platform is converging on the same page. The AI layer for work, Microsoft, Google, Salesforce. I think they all sound same. Is this a sort of a real category, or is this a feature war that ends up with AI layer collapsing into the apps people are already using? I think you alluded to it. Like I'm already on Google, or I'm already on certain platforms that I use every day. Is that the right place to people to engage with? What have to be true for one of these bets to win, one of these platform bets?
I think it's both. And if, pretending that it's only one of the two is probably going to be a rookie mistake. The category is real. There genuinely is a new layer above apps because there's some email plus calendar plus chat plus tickets, all addressable from one surface. That layer did not exist 3 years ago. It's a coherent product surface and it's going to have real winners. The feature war is also real. Every incumbent has a natural home for that layer. Microsoft has Teams and Outlook. Google has Workspace, Salesforce has the customer record, ServiceNow has the workflow engine. But none of them is going to let that AI layer collapse back into the apps. Who wins? I think whoever owns that daily active surface, like where work happens, where the user spends their workday. That's why Microsoft is kind of the favorite right now. Like Teams plus Outlook is very tightly integrated into many business workflows. Google is a very close challenger as well. Salesforce and ServiceNow are positioning around the use case strength rather than the universal surface. And AWS, we are playing a different game, more being about the platform of choice for builders and partners than competing on any specific area or domain.
Okay, let's switch a little bit and who does the work in terms of enabling these agents. On the developer side, I spend a lot of time on golden paths, trusted paths, paved roads, and opinionated defaults curated by a platform team. There's something called platform team. The developers, ops, there's a platform team. Does the same pattern translate when a user is a sales rep or a complaint analysis? Do business users need something genuinely different? Who owns them in these cases? You have quite a bit of verticals, HR versus IT versus something else. Who owns these use cases?
It's the same pattern, but a very different team. The role exists in enterprises. Someone has to, curate the safe lanes, pick the approved integration, set the guardrails before like they're deployed in the organization. But I feel the org chart has not caught up yet. What I'm seeing across customers and most of these enterprises, they're standing up new teams for this, typically called the AI platform or the agent platform, and they roll up under a chief AI officer. It looks structurally like a developer platform team, but the DNA is different. It's more around like security and compliance, less on infrastructure. And it's also more on like vendor management. And the boundary fight, like they are getting interesting with IT, who typically owns audit, identity, and platform contracts. And then there's the lines of business who owns the use cases and the workflows. And the AI champions are sitting inside each function. And then there's a security team, which is typically overarching, who has a veto on integrations. The successful ones I'm seeing, have a few things in common. They're typically small, 5 to 10 people teams. They report directly to a chief AI officer or a CTO who has the decision making authority and not buried multiple levels deep within IT. I think the interesting thing for the developer platform crowd that's listening is that the role that they've been playing for engineers for 15 years is showing up for business users now. It's the same playbook, it's just different stakeholders and different visibility that they're dealing with right now.
If I look at quick, you're talking about one assistant for the enterprise. There's sort of an horizontal assistance. And the procurement reality is like 12 specialized agent embedded in 12 SaaS platforms we talked about. All they're already paying for it. Like Google, somebody's paying for it, Microsoft, they're paying for it. And which world wins on what timeline? Where do you see it?
Yeah, I think the right framing is there's one surface and then there's many agents. Users will not have like a dozen different assistants. They will not have one monolithic horizontal assistant either. They'll have one place where they ask, and behind it, like a dozen agents will do the work. Some of these will be shipped by SaaS vendors. Some of these agents might be built internally within large organizations. Some would be ambient agents running in the background. So I think the surface is small, one or a handful, and then the implementation behind the scenes is many.
Got it.
The horizontal layer wins as a surface, and the SaaS layers win as the workflow specialists.
Makes sense. We can talk live what I was trying to work on the developer side. I have this portal called Red Hat Developer Hub, and it's essentially a backstage-based portal. The surface people are already using pre-AI to come and discover things and what's right, what's golden paths, and with plugin they see all the data. It all worked for humans just fine. And right now, humans don't want to just look at things; they want to take actions right from there. So that portal then becomes actionable surface as well. So to your point, bring your own agents and connect to it. And then essentially the portal becomes a triage point to route. Do you want to do migration? I'll help you with that. If you want to do troubleshooting, there's a SRE agent for that. Or make your own custom agents, and that place becomes where developers already coming today will come tomorrow also, hopefully, that allows them to go and do their specific task. We also believe that you have to meet them where they are, the developers where they are as well. Like in the case of developers, like they're already in cloud core. I don't want them to come here to do the same work. So we should allow both patterns. So I think what you're saying is almost similar. There's one surface, but then you have specialized agents, custom agents, vendor agents that essentially comes in that place to do the work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that federated model that you just described, like the user is in one portal, but then there are like specialist agents behind that portal. That's what is going to work out in the longer term. And the key is maintaining the user's context across all of those interactions. That is where I think the
Yeah.
value lies.
Yeah. My previous podcast, Red Monkey, actually gets into a lot of details on that. So we'll link it in the bottom of this thing. All right, we've been talking about many of these things, the form factors. Is it a chat tab or a sidebar inside an app to a native desktop layer? Everybody's selling a desktop product. And does the productivity form factor end up being something users open intentionally, or is it something running quietly in the background until it's needed? Where do you see that happening? What's driving the shift?
Yeah, what I see is that it's going ambient, and I think the end state will be that you don't open the assistant, rather the assistant opens around you where you are. The progression has been that the chat tab in the app's in-app sidebar or native desktop layer, that is one thing, but the context switching is the real user pain. So every form factor shift pulls the assistant closer to where work already happens, and the end state, like run in the background until it is actually needed. And the intentional go to assistant, that moment goes away for 80% of the task. And for the other 20%, novel work or like complex queries, that's where you have this notification, sidebar, and voice nudge.
Yeah, I was pitching to somebody like a personal assistant that runs for you in the background doing your work. If you can automate it based on your policy, it probably does automates and does something. And in cases where it needs your focus, it brings you that. It saves you a lot of you having to go around look for things to work on. It also already brings it to you in one single place.
Exactly, exactly. I think the form factor that wins Balaji is the one that doesn't ask you to remember that it exists, which means for most of the products being built today, they're not going to be the form factor that wins. It should be something that's running ambiently and shrinks to a very smaller surface area.
Yeah, speaking of running ambiently and doing some things, I mean, developers have a mature tool chain for verifying their work. They have the test, CI code review we talked about. I think equivalent for agentic system is much less settled. How are enterprises actually measuring, and you're running a real product right now, how are enterprises actually measuring whether the agents are good before production? And how do you measure it continuously afterwards?
Yeah. Yeah, I think developers have got tests. Agent teams have mostly got vibes. That's the honest state of evals today. And it's the biggest gap between the agentic AI hype and agentic AI in production. Pre-production teams are doing this well. And I think like they have three things in common. One is have an offline eval suite, curated test cases with known good outputs that they run on every prompt change, and basically like regression tests. The second thing they have is tool called evals, like not just like did the model output the right answer, but did the agent take the right action with the right parameters with the right authorization? That's a much harder problem. And the third one is like adversarial cases, like the ones that you never see in a demo, like the ambiguous queries, the partial data, the user who phrased it very vaguely and the agent did not have enough information. So as of now, I see like most teams have the first one, the offline eval suite. Some have the tool called evals, but nobody almost like has the adversarial cases, third one. And continuously in production, like the leaders who do online sampling, they've been successful. Pull a percentage of real traces and route them to human review or LLM as a judge scoring. That's something that I've seen. And I think what matters here is that models can change every 6 months. Whichever one you pick today is not going to be the one you'll be using in the next 18 months. But the eval suite that you build, the test cases, the judge prompts, and the production traces, that compounds over time. And it's a flywheel that typically, like doesn't reset even when the model changes behind the scenes. I think for PMs listening, I would say if you can invest in one piece of platform infrastructure right now, it's in the evals, not the agent, not the orchestrator, and it's the evals that are most important.
That's a good one. So that kind of leads into the next one. I think there's no buy everything from some vendor or build everything yourself. I think it's going to be a mix and match in terms of you buy something and then you build something or you bring other vendor agents to work on the platform. So what does the connectivity tissue layer have to be good at for the whole stack to hold together?
Yeah, I think there's like I think five things in priority order. One is there has to be an identity propagation layer. So whose token is moving through the to the call chain, like how is it scoped, who can see what happens at each hop. The second one is around shared context, that's permissioned and governed. It's not memory the way consumer assistants use it. It's more like context in a security primitive. The third one is around cost and rate limit awareness. You can't ship a runaway loop into production, and the connective tissue has to enforce budgets at the platform level. The fourth one, I think, is audit. I'm hearing a lot of that. Everything like should be signed, should be replayable, and the CIO should be answer like what did this agent do to this for this user on this particular date at this timestamp. They should be able to answer that question. And the last one is the human approval surface, like making approve in policy as a first class user experience, not like a hack or a modal dialogue. A first class surface where humans set the rules and agents execute within those rules. That's going to be important.
Play it forward 2 years from now, when a sales rep at a Fortune 500 starts their morning, what does the agent layer looks like? One assistant or a swarm of specialists, agent embedded inside the app they already live in? Make a prediction. I know it's 2 years is a long time in this world.
Yeah, 2 years is like an era. So I think 2 years out, if I were to take, page a guess, here's what I think a Fortune 500 sales rep's morning would look like. There's one surface embedded where they already live. Like it could be Slack or Teams or something different, and it's paired with their CRM. Behind that surface, there's a swarm of specialized agents. There could be a calendar agent, a CRM agent, a content agent, forecasting agent, all of that, and they're all coordinated by an orchestrator that the rep mostly doesn't even see. And maybe the first 15 minutes of their day, there's an ambient morning digest that has already been triaged overnight and sent to them as an email digest, summarized account activity across all of their book of business. And through the day, specialized agents would trigger per workflow on demand, like pricing question for an opportunity, go get the pricing agent to get you that information across different historicals and comparable deals. Maybe they get an RFP and a request for proposal. The RFP agent would draft a response based on the customer stated requirements and route it for human review. What I think is not going to happen is that single monolithic agent that does everything. That fantasy I think is going to get quietly buried. Even if it exists today, it's going to get buried very soon. The surprise is that the boundaries between the apps will soften from the user's point of view. The CRM, the inbox, the calendar, all that will start to feel like one product, even though the underlying systems are still separate. I think that's the win. Not that agent did my job, but I stopped switching context 100 times during the day.
Maybe in 2 years from now, VP of sales will just have agents doing sales and they don't have to hire these reps anymore. They could probably even do a video call with the customer, probably much more smoother. You don't have to worry about this salesperson not selling the product right. I think you're being a little conservative. I feel like it'll be much
Both
more.
definitely blurring between reality and like agentic AI.
Tell me about something that you believed a year ago about enterprise agentic AI that you no longer believe.
I think a year ago, I believed that the win condition for an agent platform was best agent, smartest reasoning, best models, most capable in autonomous behavior. I don't believe that anymore. I think the win condition is on the context layer, like I was saying. Whoever owns that shared governed context across the enterprise, they win. And the agent is replaceable, but the context is not. And what changed my mind was as we watched customers swap out agents, model change every 6 months, like Claude, GPT, and Gemini, whatever is the flavor of the week. The customer barely notices that. We also watched customers refuse to switch context layers. Once their data, the identity, and the audit trail and permissions live in one platform, they don't want to move. The switching cost becomes enormous at that point.
That's right. Because, for example, I'm stuck with ChatGPT and Claude because it has my context. Even if you give me the same model somewhere else, I'm like, no, I want the context because the whole thing revolves around context. So for a PM or a product, last question, or for a PM or a product leader listening, trying to figure out where the real opportunities are, not the hype. What's the one piece of advice you would give?
Yeah, one piece of advice, don't build for it, build the boring middle. Demos are beautiful. Everybody can make a demo. The production pain is at the boundaries like identity, audit, rate limits, rollback, and hundreds of edge cases that nobody talks about on stage. And that's where most of the engineering and design work actually lives. And that's where the moat is. And that's where we've seen many teams underinvest. So the concrete test you can apply is, like pick a problem where your user can verify the output in less time than it would take them to do the task itself. If they can do that, you're shipping productivity. If not, you're just like shipping a new chore disguised as productivity, like I talked about earlier. And the last thing is, if your best moment is your demo, then you're building for the wrong audience. The audience that matters is the user in week 3 of production, and the novelty is gone, and the edge cases are all they see. Build for that user.
I agree. In enterprise, it's the hardest place to kind of win because you can't just win with some gimmick. You have to have a thing that survives over 100,000 users a day or something. So totally get it. So Vipin, it was a great conversation. Thank you for joining us on Dave AI and helping unpack where the enterprise agentic AI is actually headed beyond the demos into interoperability, governance, and real adoption. For everyone watching, stick around for the final bite. My closing thoughts on why developers got the first clean AI productivity wave and why the rest of the enterprise may be harder, but it's a bigger opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Balaji.
Welcome back to the final bite. My biggest takeaway from Vipin is simple. The next wave of AI productivity will be one in the boring middle. Developers got the cleanest version first. AI could work inside code bases, suggest changes, and developer could verify it with test, code, review, and ACI. but the rest of the enterprise is messier. Sales, finance, IT, operations, legal, their work cuts across systems, permissions, approvals, and real business risks. That is why employee productivity with AI is not just about better chatbot. It needs identity, audit, permissions, rollback, human approvals, evals, and governed context. We've been at a great test. Users can verify the AI's output faster than doing the tasks themselves. You create a leverage. If verification takes longer, you create a new chore. That is the line between real productivity and demo theater. Developers got their AI, everyone else is next. But in the enterprise, the winner will not just be the smartest agent, it'll be the platform people trust with real work. That's the final byte. Thank you for watching. See you next time.